Today we visit with acclaimed travel writer and author Thomas Swick. He wrote for the South Florida Sun-Sentinel for nearly 2 decades and has published 2 books, including A Way to See the World. He's still a Fort Lauderdale resident and will discuss an essay written about his fascinating visit to Palermo, the capital of Sicily. His quest was the Addiopizzo, and he'll tell us all about it. Welcome to you, Thomas Swick. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Joe.
Fascinating essay article. I assume Addiopizzo isn't anything on the order of antipasto.
No, it's not. It's a combination of 2 words, addio meaning goodbye, farewell, and pizzo is the Italian word for protection money. And this is traditionally what you had to pay the mafia if you had a business in Sicily. And what happened in 2004, 2 young guys just graduated from the university, and they thought they'd open a bar in Palermo. And somebody pointed out to them, well, you can open a bar, but you're going to have to pay protection money to the mafia. And the reality of doing a business in Sicily came very much home to them, and they decided they weren't going to do that. Instead, they printed up stickers that said, an entire people that pays the pizzo, protection money, is a people without dignity. And they went out at night, late at night, and just plastered the city with these stickers. And the next morning, people in Palermo got up and went off to work.
Incognito, I hope.
Definitely. Late at night, very late at night, so nobody would see them. And the people of Palermo the next morning went out and sold these stickers and were very impressed. This was something that, people had felt for a long time, and here was somebody actually acting on it, doing something about it. And from there, they started the organization, Addiopizzo. And what they did is they recruited businesses to say no, to refuse to pay the protection money. And it was difficult, as you can imagine, at the very beginning. They started with people who'd been victims of the mafia already, or businesses that had never had any contact with the mafia, small businesses that the mafia never bothered with. And an example of that is the bed and breakfast that I stayed in when I went to Palermo. It's run by a woman who rents 4 or 5 rooms out of her apartment, and she had never been contacted by the mafia, but she felt this sense of solidarity with these guys, what they were doing. She was very much opposed to the mafia, and she joined out of this sense of solidarity. And so you can go to Palermo now and really participate in ethical tourism, frequenting businesses that are members of Addiopizzo. And as I said, it started out very slowly, but now, after 8 years, they have in Palermo almost 700 members, 700 businesses that refuse to pay the protection money.
Now, you described Palermo when you were there that was very run down. You likened it to Havana, and the people were very suspicious, especially of outsiders.
Well, sections of it are run down, and I described my first day, afternoon really, walking around the city and coming upon a square that was just a ruin. And what it was damage left over from the bombing of World War II. And it's obviously it's not great for the people who live there. But for tourists, I mean, how many cities can we?
It's been 60 years.
I know, but how many cities can we go and still see, still see the remnants of World War II? So, but that was just one small section of the city. Otherwise, the downtown is incredibly atmospheric. It's a southern Mediterranean city. It's a port city. It's got really lush vegetation in the parks. And it's just it's very colorful. I really actually like Palermo. The people I had read are not the kind of outgoing, vivacious people that you find on the mainland in Italy, and I found that to be true as well. But again, the people, once you get to meet them, such as the people in Addiopizzo that I talked to, and Patrizia, the owner of my bed and breakfast, she was just an angel. I arrived without my suitcase. The airline had lost my luggage. And
it even happens to travel writers?
Yes, it does. And as soon as I told Patrizia when I arrived, she got on the computer and got in touch with the airline and spent days, literally, trying to track down my suitcase.
Now, there still must have been an element of fear and intimidation. I can't see the Sicilian Mafia really taking this Addiopizzo movement lying down.
So far,
there's different tactics now. They're not as murderous.
That's right.
It's more subtle.
That's right. And so far, there have been no casualties, no retaliation on Addiopizzo. And
what would Lucky Luciano think about that?
Well, I think the mafia has changed, but what's wonderful is that, you know, Addiopizzo is hitting them economically. When the organization was founded in 2004, the mafia was earning about $200 million annually from Pizzo, from protection money. So they've cut into their economic earnings, but much more importantly, I think what they're doing is they're really changing the mentality of the average Sicilian. You know, in the past, if you had a business, you just paid. You didn't ask questions. There just seemed to be no other option. But now, you know, when some, especially young people, when they take over a business and they look around, they see there are all these other businesses that are saying no. Now, you know, they realize they can do it too. So I think there's a number of people told me the mafia is so entrenched in Sicilian society that it's going to take a generation or two for things to change. But I think thanks to Addiopizzo, that change is starting to happen already.
Now, you mentioned in the article that they are more sophisticated and they're trying to infiltrate the government itself, the mafia.
Yeah, that's what I was told by someone, that they are, you know, much more involved in the government in Rome. The thing in Sicily, you get a sense that Rome is very far away, and that's one of the reasons why you see these still these bombed out areas of the city, that they just don't get the economic help from the capital that they feel that they should. You know, the mafia itself is a very complicated subject, but my focus was more on these people who are doing what they can to fight against it, and you know, getting back to this idea of their bravery. They are incredibly brave, I think, and it's something that they just feel they need to do.
Now, historically, the Roman Catholic Church has pretty much looked the other way to the mafia, but that's changed with this Addiopizzo movement, as they've actually one of the popes, the last pope,
Pope John Paul II, came out, one that was probably the first pope to come out with a strong statement condemning the mafia. And I mentioned in the article, I wonder if there's any coincidence that he was also the first non-Italian pope for a while. But yeah, the church, I think everybody in society now is starting to stand up to the mafia and see that you know, this can't go on the way it's been for decades.
Now, you mentioned that the hotels tended to be not Addiopizzo because they have such a long history of paying this tribute. Right.
The fellow I spent most of my time with is a young man named Edoardo Safuto, and he conducts tours. He's in charge of really the travel department of Addiopizzo. The great thing about this organization is that they not only give support to businesses that refuse to pay protection money, they also run tours, anti-mafia tours of Sicily. And you can take a one-day tour of Palermo with the organization. You can take a 10-day, they call it a cultural, gastronomic, and anti-mafia tour.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
It does, definitely. I mean, it's the culture and the food are obviously two of the main reasons people go to Sicily, and then you get this added historic and ethical dimension. But Eduardo was, you know, a really interesting young man, and his his point is just try to get people to see that.
We return. It is today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper with you. And we resume our conversation with travel writer and author Thomas Swick. We're talking about his visit to Palermo, the capital of Sicily. Tell me, Tom, about your visit to Zen 2, which is a ghetto, and that they even likened it sort of to the Bronx, South Bronx even, drug trade and kid couriers and that.
Right. I was invited to lunch one day. It was a woman, a writer who lives in Palermo. She was a friend of a friend, and she had a friend there who works in Zen. It's called Zen. It has nothing spiritual about it. It's just an acronym for Northern Extension Zone. But her friend works there and makes handbags with the women who live there, and they make these very expensive designer handbags that fetch very high prices in shops in Palermo. But it's a kind of a volunteer work that she does, and I expressed an interest in seeing this slum because I thought it might be interesting for my story, because everybody at the luncheon said the whole place is full of mafia. And we went there, and it wasn't as harrowing as I thought it might be. I think if you're an American, it takes a lot to impress us with a slum. I'd seen much worse places before, but it was fairly a new complex. It wasn't very old. It was a little run down. But as we drove around, I was looking at all the men especially and wondering if they were mafiosi. And I refer in my essay to V.S. Naipaul, who wrote a travel book about the American South. And he was driving around and was very intent on finding a redneck, because he'd heard so much about rednecks, and he wanted to see one himself.
Shouldn't have been too hard.
No, but I felt somewhat the same way at Zen. And we went to see the priest who works there, and this gets back to what you were saying earlier about the Catholic Church. The priest who works in the parish church there gives space to these women to make their handbags, and the woman who works with them told me that she's not very popular with the men in the complex, because they don't like the fact that their wives are leaving the house, that they're making money, that they're getting this sense of empowerment. But for them, it's a wonderful thing.
Tell me a little bit about something in the essay that you mentioned. We talked about the Addiopizzo tourism, where you can go the Anti-Mafia tours, but also you noticed that there was a lot of Godfather tourist paraphernalia, and that you could even go to the town of Corleone, 40 miles outside of Palermo, and they have there's an Anti-Mafia museum there.
Right. I mean, Corleone is popular with tourists because of its connection to the Mafia. And what really annoys Eduardo, who I mentioned earlier, is that when they take tourists there, that they never tell them the reality. They make this romantic picture of the Mafia, and so Addiopizzo has started their own tours to this town, and the mayor a few years ago actually opened an anti-mafia museum in the town, even though it has a long connection with the Mafia. So Eduardo focuses on that aspect, and he told me that when you go in any souvenir shop in Palermo, and you'll see shirts with pictures of Marlon Brando as the Godfather. You see hats that say "Kiss my hand" in Italian, and Eduardo said, making money off of that sort of thing is really a crime. That it really doesn't. It doesn't address the reality. And what annoys him is that when people take the Mafia tours, the guides never mention Addiopizzo and the counter, the anti-Mafia movement.
So sort of a glamorized view of the Mafia on the American side of things.
Well, I know. It's through, our books and our movies.
The hideous murders.
Exactly. They have gotten a kind of romantic image. And one of the great things is if you go to Sicily and you contact Addiopizzo, and I'll give you a website so people can contact them. You really see the reality of what the Mafia has done, and you see the reality of the people who are fighting against them.
Now, the Mafia, I think, historically has always proven to be a very adaptive organization for whatever the circumstances were. Is this a temporary lull in mafia activity?
That's a good question, and I'm not versed enough in what's going on with the mafia to really answer adequately. I hope so. And again, when I was talking with Eduardo, you kind of got the sense that definitely at the moment things are fairly quiet. He did say though that things can change quickly, so you're never quite sure.
So you recommend our listeners would probably enjoy the Addiopizzo tour.
Definitely.
Probably go online and get information about that.
Yeah, let me give you the website. It's Addiopizzo Travel, and that's ADDIOPIZZO Travel, all one word, .IT, and then /ENG for English. Or if you just go on the...
You probably just Google
Addiopizzo, you'll get the website as well, right. And, they'll give you lists of the few hotels and the many bed and breakfasts that are members of their organization. They give you names of restaurants, shops. There's actually one wonderful little store in Palermo that sells products, only products that are made by Pizzo-free enterprises. So anything you buy there is made by people who don't pay protection money. And I went there, my first day there, I was talking to the sales girl, and she told me that she and her husband have started a business to arrange Pizzo-free events. She and her husband had a Pizzo-free wedding. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, everybody we had was free of the mafia, the singer,
even the florist,
hotel, the florist. And it really hit me then, Joe, how much of everyday life in Sicily is connected, unless you really work at it, like she and her husband do, how much of it's connected to the mafia.
We're visiting with author and travel writer, Thomas Swick. And we're talking about Palermo. Thomas, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your long history as a travel writer, about what you term purposeful travel, and the benefits of it. And you recommended instead of just going and relaxing and just kind of being serendipitous, that you have a plan.
Yeah, I think a lot of travelers have found this on their own, that when your trip has a purpose and maybe a quest or definitely a theme, it makes it much more meaningful. And you just basically follow your interests. If you're interested in golf, well, a trip to the old courses in Scotland is a great thing to do. Personal trips, people who go back to the old homeland and look for ancestors. One of the things this automatically does is it puts you in touch with the people. When you're just visiting places as a regular tourist, you basically stay away from the people who live there. You stay in hotels, you eat in restaurants, you go to museums, you frequent souvenir shops. You're living kind of a parallel life to the people who actually live in the place. I often tell people when you buy stamps and they offer to sell, when you buy postcards and they offer to sell you the stamps with the postcards, always say no and go to the post office, because that may be the one time in your trip that you experience the life of a local, waiting in line at the post office. And, who knows, you could get in conversation with somebody. But yeah, the purposeful trips put you in touch with the people and let you experience more the way they live. And it gives your trip a focus.
I've always found it interesting I try and take public transportation as much as possible, like the tube in London, and you just get a totally different feel of the people, and you feel like one of them.
Yes, I know, and I just don't like taxis anywhere. I always feel I'm kind of trapped in the back of a taxi, and I never quite...
You're not sure whether you're getting ripped off.
Exactly. I never quite trust the taxi driver. There's some, obviously sometimes they can be very informative, but yeah, I definitely recommend public transportation. Above ground, usually better than underground, because the problem with underground, you don't see anything. And if you can figure out the bus system, you can really observe something while you're traveling. In London, of course, getting on the top deck of a bus is almost like a...
I once did that and just decided we'd ride this bus to the end of the line.
Yeah.
And it went out in an area that really wasn't very good neighborhood, and we were the last ones on the upper deck of the bus, and the driver said, "This is it, chap. You got to get off." We said, "Wait a minute, you're not going to make the loop around?" "Nope, this is the end of the line. We had to go to another bus stop and then wait for."
That has happened to me as well.
But,
yeah.
I guess it's good when you're vacationing or traveling to have a little bit of excitement, a little bit of fear, and the unknown.
Travel writers have a saying that the worst trips make the best stories, and there is something to that, because it's often travel writers go somewhere and they don't really know what the story is. So if something...
Tom, I assume most people say when you tell them you're a travel writer, they think, "Whoa, what a plum job. It's exciting. You get paid to travel to exotic places, and I'm sure many opulent doors are opened to you because they find out you're a travel writer and give them publicity." I bet that's not really accurate.
No, it's not. Most of the time I travel incognito. I'll tell people I talk to on the street or in a bar that I'm a travel writer, just to set their minds at ease, because I ask a lot of questions and they might wonder why why is this guy so nosy. So I say I'm a travel writer and I'm just curious. I want to find out about the place. But as far as the hotels go, I don't mention it. And there is that. I come out of a newspaper background, and in a newspaper you definitely have that idea that it's a conflict of interest. If you accept any favors or any free trips, then you can't write.
Say a personal tour of the Taj Mahal, or...
Well, if you meet somebody who's not with the tourist board or something, just a friendly local, and he gives you a tour, that would be fine. But I usually, when I travel, like this trip to Palermo, I didn't talk to the Palermo tourist authorities. I didn't, because they're just going to give you the party line. They're just going to tell you the...
Or like a restaurant that would fawn over you.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, in Sicily, you can go to almost any restaurant, a stand-up bar, and have wonderful food. You don't have to go to a really fancy restaurant. That's one thing I should mention again about Sicily, though. The food was just spectacular.
I like that description of the spaghetti you had with the fresh tomatoes and mint.
Mint and swordfish.
And swordfish.
Which I was told is a fairly common combination in Sicily. And then it was followed by the desserts were out of this world. I mean, lots of things with almond paste, and it's a great place for eating.
Now, when you get an idea and you're going to do a column and you're traveling to an exotic place, you've got to get all your ducks in a row, I suppose, because you can't afford to get there and say, "Oh, this was a big mistake."
Well, that's the great thing about the internet. In the old days, I would go to places and hope to meet people. Now, as soon as I know where I'm going next, I tell pretty much everybody I meet, because it's amazing how often somebody says, "Oh, I have a cousin there. Or, I have a friend from college who lives there now," and I'll say, "Well, what's their email?" And so I'll contact the people even before I leave, and try to set up a meeting or a coffee or something. So when I get there, I already have people to see and to talk to. But just there is a certain element of serendipity in all travel, and I talked about traveling with a theme and having a purpose, but sometimes it is fun to just wander, just look down the street and think, maybe that could be interesting if I go down there. Let's see what happens. I always follow music. If I hear music, I'll always follow that, because there might be something going on down there.
Now, maybe if you don't have a lot of budget, you could really do something kind of nice here in Florida. We're getting close to the start of the Major League Baseball season. You could see all the teams that train here. Not as many do anymore, but still, you've got the Vero area with the Cardinals and the Marlins.
Right,
so
up in Jupiter.
So every day there's going to be a game there in Jupiter. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and I really think that's a great thing to do in Florida this time of year. Unfortunately, in Fort Lauderdale, we lost the Orioles a few years ago, because I used to love going to see them. But yeah, you can go
train at Old Miami Stadium too.
Right. You can go up to Jupiter. You can go to Port St. Lucie, see the Mets. or go over to Fort Myers, and the Red Sox and the Minnesota Twins are there. Up around Sarasota and Clearwater, there's some teams. So yeah, and you meet some interesting people who come down from the north. They come every year to watch
The
their
real
team.
diehard fans.
Yeah, yeah.
And you probably run into the sports writers and some of the players because it's not a big urban area.
Yeah, I did a story on Vero Beach, one of the last years that the Dodgers were there. You know, they had Dodger Town, and it was their long-standing spring home. And it's very sad, I think, that they left that town because they were really loved, and it was
Such a tradition.
and it was a wonderful facility.
And the Yankees in Fort Lauderdale for so many years.
Yeah, yeah. But in Vero, you got very close to the players, and you know, you'd see Maury Wills and talking to people who we'd see every spring, and it was a great atmosphere, definitely.
Tell me a little bit about your 10-day hike in Japan for a story for the Smithsonian Magazine.
Well, that was kind of one of those physical trips. I love walking, and I did a pilgrimage in Poland when I lived there in the 1980s, and that was a 9-day walk. And this trip in Japan was along a section of one of the old highways that connected Tokyo and Kyoto. And it went through the mountains, so there are parts of it that really haven't changed much since the 1800s. And they're the towns are all kind of a half-day walk from each other. So you'd set off early in the morning from one town, you'd get to the next town around mid-afternoon, you'd check into your inn, your little Japanese ryokan, and wander around town, have a meal at the inn, and then wake up the next morning and walk again. It's a great way to lose weight because you eat very healthy Japanese food. You eat fish, rice, miso soup every night, and then again every morning for breakfast, and then you walk 9 or 10 miles and have the same meal again in the evening. So for people who are looking to get trim, it's a wonderful thing to do. But more seriously, it's a great way to see traditional Japanese life. You're away from the cities, and you see there are a couple towns that we went through that were really cultural showcases. They're just beautiful, beautiful.
I imagine
places.
you're not much of a fan of, say, luxury ocean cruising.
Ocean cruising? You know, I love ships, though, because my first experiences, in my youth, I took 3 transatlantic crossings. I took the QE2 to France for a year to learn French. Came back.
Well, that's kind of special.
Well, there was a special youth fair in those days, so we were all I had 2 cabin mates in the lowest deck, and we just had the greatest time. And then I came back on a Russian ship, and then did one on a Polish ship. So I developed a real love of being on ships.
Well, I certainly want to thank you, Thomas Swick. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about traveling. I'm beginning to get the urge to maybe check out